Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session with your host,
Michael Rearden.
Hello.
Hey, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So we have an easy day today. We're just going to be talking about your business coaching work and then, of course, get into your physical therapy business as well. So the first question was going to start off. First question I just wanted to ask you is, how did you fall on this type of work? But before, you kind of do that, kind of also tie in, a little bit about yourself, and like where you're from, etc.
I'm Stephanie Telibasa. I'm a physical therapist and the owner of House of Physical Therapy in New York City. I now live in Sarasota, Florida, and I've moved away from treating patients and I run my practice remote. And I've now spent my time coaching other physical therapists who want to open their own practices and treat one-on-one.
Okay. Yeah. So that's how the business coaching ties in well. Because when you're starting off a business, it's typically full of uncertainties. And many people are like, well, I don't know how to do this. I know when people do mentoring, they're like, how do I balance books and accounting? There's so many different things that they have to look at. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, what is the one thing you wish you knew when you started off that someone told you?
I'm grateful that I didn't know as much as I do now because I feel like in the beginning, it's good to kind of jump in a little bit naive and not really understand the magnitude of what you're getting into and kind of learn as you go. I do wish that I had more of an understanding of the finances. That's not something that we get in PT school. In med school, we're focused on learning to diagnose and treat a patient, and there is no formal education on running a business. So I do wish I understood the financials better, opening my own practice, because I definitely had a good grasp on the patient care and I was very confident in my technique. But that's something that I learned over time, and that's something that I really infuse into my coaching is learning how much should we be spending in each of these categories? When can I afford to hire? How do I pay myself if I'm no longer the one doing the work every day?
Yeah, it's, schooling is very interesting because it doesn't matter necessarily what school you go for, be a teacher, be a doctor, etc. You have to leave the books and you have to go to the real world concepts. When I was a teacher, for example, you learn all the methodologies, you learn all of these things. And then when you get into a classroom of 30 kids who don't want to listen, guess what? All of those things are out the window now. So now you have to figure out, what am I going to do? So it's almost like, okay, we learn on the fly. But luckily for me, I didn't do it by myself. I had great cooperating teachers, good mentors, directors who can, see where I was going and say, okay, well, let's try this, let's do this. So I had a good support network. And I think when you are starting off a business, you should definitely try to create that support network, whether it be business coaches, mentors, someone who can say, okay, let's do this together. I know it seems like you're going off into war by yourself when you're starting a business, but it doesn't have to be that. Why do you think so many people, when they start off, in their whole idea of business, that they feel like they have to do it by themselves and not ask for help?
Oh, I can answer this from a personal perspective and also what I hear from my clients. There's a sense of feeling like I should know this already, or there's also a sense of pride that comes from, well, I'm taking this leap to go out on my own because I know that it can be done a better way, right? So a lot of us that, at least in the PT world, we're moving into private practice because we maybe are working in a setting that is high volume and we're not able to give the care that we want. So there's this sense of pride of, okay, well, if I'm taking this leap and I know how to set up a treatment plan correctly in my eyes, then I should be able to do it myself and I shouldn't have to ask someone else for help. I learned that it's best to surround yourself with like-minded individuals. And in the beginning, instead of looking at other physical therapists, because I kind of felt isolated that no one knew what I was trying to create. So I went to other healthcare providers. So chiropractors, nutritionists, other MDs, and hair salons. And I learned from other service-based businesses how they were running things. So this way it didn't feel like I was asking someone who wasn't where I wanted to be. And it was more of a neutral, we could share ideas and there was no sense of competition or, the sense of you don't understand because your model isn't the same as mine.
It's like your pride is getting bruised and your ego is getting abused. So
Yeah.
you have to, forego that almost in a sense of humility. Because if we can say, you know what, I'm new to the game, I can learn from others. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you learn from someone and you have to replicate exactly what they do. You can always change it up. And I think people, they look at something, they're like, well, if it's done this way, it's always been done this way. There's a saying. The saying is, it has always been done this way or something like that. It's a terrible saying, because if we look at something that's always been done this way, we can go all the way back to the horse and buggy, right? People will still be riding horses around. But here we are. We have cars, we have EV cars and stuff like that. Times change and businesses change too. The dynamic of what people are looking for. You had a brick and mortar physical therapy, and now it can be done remotely. I know COVID kind of threw things in a haywire with all of that happening. Same thing with my business, where you can have people coming into the office and then all of a sudden everything is done remotely. And we adapted, of course, but I'm sure people, if you looked at, 1990 or something, like, things are going to be done remotely. It's like, wait, I don't like that idea. But we adjust, and businesses have to adjust. How would a business owner adjust quickly in a time like that? Because we can look at what happened during the pandemic, and not many businesses, had a good story to say, saying that they won at the end of it. Many places had to close their doors because of the uncertainty, because of the lack of funding or whatever was happening. How can we start to become more flexible if something like that would happen again?
Yeah, I'm happy that you asked about this, because this was definitely a pivotal moment in our business, and it strongly influences how I coach. So one of the things that I am non-negotiable about is that we must have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, and that is covering not only your rent, but your employee's salary and the owner's salary. So that is something that I help people right away prepare for, because that's what saved me during the closures in 2020. So we're in the center of New York City. We're also working with very healthy individuals. These are typically athletes, people with overuse injuries. So there was not a strong urge to continue care like a post-op case would be. So we really had to close our doors for a couple months. And yes, we switched to remote, and that was helpful, but it still wasn't the same level of revenue as when you're operating with 2 full-time therapists in person. So something that I did throughout that time, and really what pushed me to step into the coaching space, is I went to all of my mentors and I asked for help. I asked what they were doing. And really the cohesive answer was to go through layoffs. And as someone who is a year and a half in business and very, very close relationships with my team, all I was thinking is, okay, well, if they're not with me, that means I have to figure this out by myself. And if they're not with me and this passes in a couple months, how do I ask them, okay, I didn't pay them for X amount of time. How do I ask them to now come back? So what we did was we communicated openly through that time, and I shared, this is what's in our emergency fund. We got 5 payrolls left. We have 4 payrolls left, and everyone kind of came together, and that's how we were able to pivot online and promote that service. And that's how we were able to really come back so much stronger. And during that time, because we were working so heavily with the fitness population, all of our referral sources are independent personal trainers, small business owners, small fitness studios. So since we weren't treating patients, we were able to connect with them, see what they needed, and offer our support. And I think that really is what helped us transition through and be able to pick back up and open up in the fall.
And I think one of the things to definitely point out to the audience is the communication that you were able to do with your team. some people are just like, I'm the CEO, I'm the owner, I have to figure this all out for myself. And you were able to openly communicate. And I remember I worked with a company that didn't communicate. The company is closed now. But the fact that they didn't communicate, it was a big company too, can be a death sentence, because you have to kind of say, hey, this is the problem. Let's figure out the solution, versus I have a problem. Let me figure out the solution. And it's the I aspect that creates a lot of trouble when it comes to a business. Because if you think about a business, yes, you can have a business by yourself, but typically at some point when the business grows to a certain level, you're going to have to delegate the work. You're going to have to hire employees to help with something. For me, I have editors and I have social media people and stuff. There's a lot of people that help with my dream. And it's not so much that they don't have dreams too. It's just that they found a person, I guess, that they say, we like what you're doing. We would love to come on board. And even if it's for a period of time, I enjoy everyone that I work with. Of course, the hiring process is pretty intensive. You treat them like family. You say, you know what, like, how can we win together? It's not so much of I'm making all the money, I'm the CEO, and I'm all this, and I know, like, from looking at Fortune 500 companies, for example, we could look at Dell, Apple, and all this stuff, and we could look at the CEOs. They make all of this money, and I think there's like some CEOs make like $75 million, and like managers will make like 160. So it's like they're getting pennies on the dollar. And for me, it's like, hey, I don't mind, just making sure my cost of living is all set. Of course, we have the emergency fund over, already set. It's like very Dave Ramsey's, like, okay, make sure the baby steps are taken care of if you got no debt, right? But then also to make sure, like the people are also taken care of, because the people who are taking care of you, of course, if you take care of them, they're going to take care of you even better. So I just love that. And then also the aspect of your clients too. Like, you give the best to them. You say, okay, whatever, above and beyond, like that's my motto, above and beyond, because what is going to separate you from the next business, the next physical therapy business, the next podcast, the next coaching business? It's going to be your definition to how much you are going to put into the care for them. And my question is, how would a business know what path that they need to be on at a specific time? For example, you knew that there needed to be a transition where you had to make a change from the brick and mortar to the remote. Is there signs that a business can know? Are there things that you will look at when you go into a business and you say, all right, I'm seeing these things, and these things are not, good. If we keep doing this, we have to make a change.
Yeah, well, just to clarify, we only offered remote sessions through COVID. So that was the pivot. So that was for around 3 to 4 months, we were operating remote only. So that actually introduced, now that's an additional service. We still have 2 brick and mortar clinics in New York City and Brooklyn. So really the only remote portion of the business was myself transitioning. So I can speak to what I felt when I was looking to expand. Around 2019, we were about 2 years in business, and we were really maxed out in our first location, which is really small. If you know New York City, it's 500 square feet, and we're operating, 2 therapists side by side in that space. So at that point, I started to think about, okay, let's replace me here, and let's open a second location. And during that time, it was really the cues that I was getting. So I started to, I love working with patients. I love my office. And I started to dread going to work. I started to dread, I was subletting a second space so that this way I could build up the clientele. Usually you kind of do baby steps. So we sublet, test the new neighborhood, and then once you start to get some traction, we look at signing an official lease. And as I was going in and I was kind of building up some of the things that I really loved doing the first time around, I was dreading and I was feeling exhausted. Now, at this point, I was working 50 to 60 hours a week of direct patient care, plus the back end of the business. So that was the point when I started to notice, okay, if I'm not enjoying this, and the primary location is operating whether I'm in the office or not, maybe I just take a beat and step back and then see, can we have the primary office operate without me? And if that's so, then maybe we don't immediately rush to open a second location. And that's where throughout 2020, 2021, I started to just optimize that first location and get to the point where we had 3 full-time therapists there. And in 2024, last year, we opened a second location. And this time I wasn't the one. So we talked a little bit about the owner driving things. I wasn't the one that drove that second location, because now that I have a team, I could follow what the team is interested in. And one of our therapists was very interested in Brooklyn. That's her neighborhood. That's where she has connections. And I followed what she wanted and kind of removed myself of where I wanted to go with the business. And that's what allowed us to open without me physically having to do all of the build out, do everything myself for that second.
Yeah, it's definitely a time consumer. I think of the story of the guy who he created Gorilla
Mhm.
Glue, and he went on Shark Tank or something. He was like partnering with some other guy. And basically, once the sharks knew he created Gorilla Glue, they were like, "Oh my God, like, why do you need us?" Because he's so successful, right? He sold it for a lot of money. And one of the things he said was, "I don't have the time. I don't have the time to rebuild what I have built." And he knew the struggles and the challenges, and he didn't want to do it again without help. So he says, "Let me find an investor. Let me get some help." Even though he can do it by himself, he has done it, but he understood that time was his constraint. And for you, the second business in Brooklyn, like, you would have to create the connections again and spend all this time, and you would have to figure out, okay, like, where do we go? And it can be debilitating, especially if you have a family, especially if you have other ambitions, if you have other responsibilities, parent, for example, because everyone's circumstances going to be different. Some
Yes.
people might be fresh out of college and they have the runway. They're like, I could do whatever. I have all of these years. And some people are literally, touching 50, and they're like, okay, I got to make sure this is right. And so I know there's a lot of uncertainty when they have to make a next step and they don't have the runway. Because if we're talking to someone who is getting ready to graduate college versus someone who is 10 years from retirement, the conversation would be extremely different. How would you approach those two different conversations?
Yeah, so early on, it's very easy to kind of say, let's go the more of the hustle route, which is what I did in the beginning, right? I was less than 2 years out of school. I could just work a per diem job, work the weekends, save up the money, and pay for the build out and startup costs, and also, be on the ground building that up. Now, fast forward to close to 10 years out of school. It's not the style that I want to do the second time around. And that's where you're really looking at things like systems. So rather than doing everything manual, I've kind of built out systems where even something like networking or marketing, we have this repeatable system that we can plug in, spread out who's doing the actual legwork of each of those tasks. And now with a team, we can divvy that up, and it's not one person. And it's also not starting from scratch over and over again. Right. I like to use networking as an example because I think a lot of people get turned off by networking because they think of the old school method of like handing out flyers and knocking on doors to introduce yourself. And that is just so much time for very little return. So if we could streamline something like networking and make it a template, a repeatable pattern where we know what return we're getting and we know how to optimize it, and we can also lean on our team to do some of those in-person meetings, then we can spread it out and we can get a lot more done in a shorter amount of time. We grew so much faster in Brooklyn than the first time around 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, systems are worth their weight in gold. I remember when I was in college and I worked at a swim school for children, and the owner, he had like 3 swim schools, and he said the first swim school took forever to get going. He said the second one was a lot quicker. The third one was easy because he knew already what to do. He knew the systems. He knew how to hire people. He already had everything laid out. It was just like, okay, let's, like if we want to do it, let's do it. And I think people, they look at the first one as their baby. They're like, oh, I don't want to let this one go. And if you can relinquish that and say, okay, I'm getting 2, I'm getting 3, that now we have a franchise. It's not so much that you have lost your passion for the job or whatever. It's understanding that a business grows. And I think when we look at business, there's a difference when a person starts something they love versus a business they want to grow and share to the world, right? So we could look at a franchise, for example. Let's look at a clothing store. Let's look at Kohl's or something, right? So Kohl's is just a regular clothing store. And, I'm sure like the CEO of Kohl's is not like, we need to make sure the fabrics are the best fabrics in the world. And we need to make sure that everything is, they have systems that take care of all of that, right? So he's worried about, okay, let's, figure out which markets we need to go. Let's figure out which assets. If a company is not, coming through with fulfillment, we look at that. He has other things to worry about. He knows how to hire general managers, that knows how to run the stores and things like that. People can get a franchise at Kohl's if they want to, right? And they get some starting and stuff like that. But there are things that have to be there. Now we can look at just the inception of the first Kohl's. It's like, well, like I don't want to lose this Kohl's or something. Kohl's will close down a bunch of stores if they're not making profit. So it's, their goals are very different. And I do want to get into the question of the goal of a business. There's a book called The Goal. It's literally called The Goal. And it's a story of manufacturing. And so I'm not going to get into it since you know about it. And basically the goal was to make a profit, but like, how do we do it? So I wanted to get into the conversation. How would a person understand their goal? Would it be just to have a business, even though they love their business? Would it be to expand, to grow, to et cetera?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to back up and say I love that you used the analogy of the first one is your baby, because that's very much what it feels like in the beginning. And it's almost, you're so close and you're so involved that you can't ever think about not being there 24 hours. And you almost don't want to because you love it so much. You want to be with it all the time. So I kind of said when I stepped back, I was sending my child to school. And then when I moved to Florida and I was living in a different state, okay, well, now my kid's off at college. That doesn't mean that I don't ever check in and that I'm not involved. That's the next stage in order for this business to grow bigger than myself. And I think when we're talking about the goal of the business, well, most people in the beginning, I'm going to reference the book, The E-Myth, they just want to get themselves a job that they love. They don't like the current job that they're in. Right? In healthcare right now, the problem is we're all being pushed for volume because it's very, very hard with insurance reimbursement. So moving out on your own, the initial goal feels like I just want to see my patients for 8 hours and that's it. I don't want to worry about all of these pressures and profits and things that a big corporation are pushing on you. But then once you start doing that, when I usually start to work with people, it's okay, well, now I have patients that love to see me, but I don't know what to do because I don't have any systems in place. And I'm now taking work home because that's, just as things grow and as your schedule fills up, it's like, okay, well, where do I do all of the back end work if it's just me? So I think the goal kind of shifts as you get into it and as you have some context. And as you're able to think bigger. A lot of times when I talk to someone who's just starting out, they're like, I never want to have employees. And then I talk to someone 3 years in and they're like, I can't wait for the day where I can take a vacation and keep my doors open, right? Because I have employees to go in and do that. So for me, the goal is always to have an impact on the physical therapy profession. So I have been in this world since I'm 15. I think maybe even sooner. I didn't even have working papers when I worked in the first PT clinic. And I've seen good patient care and I've seen rushed patient care. I've seen how physical therapists specifically have been able to catch red flags and rule out very serious conditions because we have the time to build relationships with patients. So my goal is to have as many physical therapists make a 6-figure salary working in one-on-one settings. So whether I do that by hiring as many people at House of PT or by helping other PTs open one-on-one practices and hire their own therapists, how I achieve that goal, that can be flexible as long as I have the biggest reach. And, it's really important that physical therapists are able to make a livable wage and be able to spend the time with patients to catch those red flags that aren't being caught when you're seeing 5 patients in an hour. Or, when you're going to an urgent care center, right? That's so much more common now. People are going to walk-in clinics. They're seeing a doctor that doesn't know their medical history. It's very symptoms-based. Who's getting to the underlying cause, right? And if we're not paying physical therapists a salary that they can actually pay back their loans and live off of, then they're going to burn out. And the more people that leave our field, who's taking care of us?
Very true. I think of like the question sometimes, like a person will ask, like, what makes your business different? And clearly what you just said is that, like the attention to detail, the customer care, and it's going to get people coming in for more because people don't necessarily want to just get something that's a blanket. Like, here, like here's a Band-Aid, do this. And, like they want step by step saying, okay, hey, I care about your results. And when you can just even give just like an inkling of that to that client, oh my goodness, it's like their world is opened up because we live in a very secular world. So, like where people are just by themselves. This is like, all right, I'm going to fight this war by myself. I'm going to go do this by myself. I have to heal by myself. And we don't have to go by ourselves in life. And it's very similar to the grocery store. I like to use the grocery store analogy because it just makes sense. You go to the grocery store and you buy stuff from the grocery store. You didn't grow those tomatoes. You didn't grow that lettuce. You didn't manufacture these goods, right? The pastas, the rices and stuff like that. You got it from someone else. So of course you worked and you got money in this trade and barter. But we are all here and we're all working to kind of make things work. So we forget, especially in a world of social media where we can order food and they leave it at our doorstep. We don't have to talk to anyone. It's almost like I did it by myself, right? No. Someone did that, right? Someone made your food. Before that, someone grew the food, then someone delivered your food, right? There's many more steps to that too, if you want to really break it down. And, I think when it comes to connection, and you can really connect with your clients and your patients, it really says something about the business. It truly says, hey, we care about the results. We care about you. And I think, like if we can get more businesses like that, more people are going to not only live a healthier life, but they're going to want to only, tell about your business. Like, hey, you're going to love this person. You're going to love this business. It's because they get something more than just the care. They get more than just the results. They get the human experience. And I think that's so important. And the question I want to ask you next is because we talked about the physical therapy. What type of clients are you coming in? Do you have coming in? I know you talked about like you have like people who do sports, things like that. Are there like, just those people? Are you dealing with elderly also, etc.?
Yeah, so it's a pretty wide mix, but the common theme is more of mindset. So the people that come to us are using exercise as their stress relief. These are people with high demand jobs. They might be traveling a lot for their job. They might be working really long hours. And then the thing that they turn to get all of that excess energy out at the end of the day is a hard workout. So that's kind of the common theme. And what we've seen is when someone gets injured and they can't do that workout, and now they don't have any outlet for that stress, well, what's the alternative? Are they not sleeping now because they didn't get the stress out? Does that eke into their next day? Now their diet is thrown off. What ends up happening? Are they having an extra glass of wine to unwind? And then now that extra glass of wine is turning into a few. Is it that this is removing their social outlet? Right? In New York City, there's all of these run clubs and, instead of going to dinner or drinks with a friend, you usually go to a fitness studio with a friend and you check out a new class. So if we remove that, are we now taking out that social aspect too and becoming even more divided, like you were saying, and more isolated? So really looking at that whole feature of if this person can't work out, what does that mean? So rather than telling someone to rest and just take time off from the gym, like you would hear at a traditional doctor's office, right? Your ankle hurts when you run, just rest for a week or two and then go out and run again, see how it goes, right? So rather than just doing that, we understand that removing that means we're removing an outlet. So what can we put there instead? And we're looking at kind of the whole body wellness versus just looking at in isolation. Okay, you can't work out. Let's treat your ankle and you don't work out for a month or so.
Yeah, I have so many stories of people, they'll say that they stopped running or they stopped going to the gym because they got injured. It could be something as small as their ankle, back, whatever it be. And, like a week goes by, a month goes by. Oh, I guess I got to go see a doctor. They see a doctor, the doctor maybe give them some medicine, and that's it. And so, fast forward a year, they never got back into it. They never got back into running. They never got back into going to the gym. And it was a passion of theirs. Like they loved it. Like it was raining. It didn't matter. It was snowing. It didn't matter. It was COVID. It didn't matter. They would still do what they wanted to do, right? Because I was like, I have to do this. And then it was just a small little hiccup in their life, a small fracture, like small crack, and everything fell apart. And I just find that to be so astounding in a bad way. Is like how could you just allow that to kind of just topple everything over so quickly? For people, if they wanted to start to make changes, they would have to, as you said, figure out how to replace it with something more positive, right? So not just, all right, stay home and watch more TV, you're going to get better by doing that. I mean, you might feel a little bit better, but at the end of
there
the
is
day,
a
the
time and
body
a
needs to
place for
move.
rest. Yes.
We need to move. We need to move, especially as we grow older. Think of osteoporosis. As for older people, you have to move. And for the people who are not moving, or they're giving themselves a very sedate life with all the remote work happening, because companies are even downsizing their offices and brick and mortars, because if they can do it online, why not do it online? Because now we don't have to lease a building or something like that. But it still doesn't beat the in-person care. I love going to the gym. Like even if I had a home gym in the house, and I have a lot of gym equipment, but I love going to the gym. Like I go into the gym, I talk to someone. Like today, I was going to the gym. I was serious too. I was in serious mode when I went to the gym. I didn't want to talk to nobody. But sure enough, all the people I talked to, they were there. I was like, oh, let me talk to this guy. Let me talk to this person. So, and it's only 5-10 minutes, something like that. It makes the workout take a little bit longer, but it's the joy of going there and just the anticipation of like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to get in this workout. I don't know if I'm going to give 100%, 90%, whatever. I don't know if someone's going to come distract me or whatever, but it's the joy of life, right? We appreciate all the things that come, sometimes good, sometimes the bad. And it's the people that make life truly worth it. There are studies of people who lived in isolation for a week, and they just basically talked about it. They were like, "This is something I'll never want to do again." And we have to understand that we were not created to be isolated from one another. We were created to ask for help from the beginning of our conversation, from the inception of your business. We ask for help to later on, and you're looking at your physical well-being. We were created to, hey, let's do this together. Because when I look at my physical fitness, I work out better by, working with other, groups of people, or just someone with me, a workout partner, if you just want to make it simple, because they push you. Because they say, hey, I know you got a little bit more. You got to do 15, not 12. I'm watching you, right? So you have that there. And people will always throw their own pity party. Oh, boo hoo, whatever, something happened. And they allow that circumstance to define them. And I just love people who can, look at someone and say, okay, well, this is what we're capable of today. Let's make the progress. Let's keep pushing. And, let's be that cheerleader for that individual, because sometimes a person can be extremely negative, and it's almost like they're fighting a battle, or a losing battle, because they're just negative. Their subconscious is just boom, like negative. But if you have a coach, you have a therapist coming in saying, hey, I know you can do it. Right? You did it once before. We can do it again. We can get back to good. We can get back to that youthful exuberance that you had. It just takes some time.
Absolutely. And I think there's an objectivity to that, having a neutral third party, right, that can tell you, push you when necessary. And then also the accountability, right? That could be your gym partner, or after you get injured, there's a little bit of fear of, okay, is this pain I should push through? Is this pain that I should stop? And having a physical therapist guide you and answer those questions. Like, we have patients record themselves at the gym and send it to us for feedback, or they'll say, hey, I have this, and this when I squat. Is that normal? Is that expected? Should I slow down? So I think having guidance and customized guidance, a lot of what we hear, we treat people from college to, up into mid 60s. And a lot of people are looking up their symptoms online, and they're going to Dr. Google, or they're looking at TikTok. And I love that, because that means they're invested and they're curious and they want to solve their problem. But what the missing piece is, the expertise portion, is knowing, does this apply to me? And that's going to come from having a doctor evaluate you, right? A physical therapist evaluate you and say, yes, this is the right thing to do, or no, this isn't really the best exercise for this situation because of XYZ. Right. And I think we can kind of get overwhelmed by the amount of available information now, and knowing how to apply it, and really having that structured plan to return. And, that situation that you described of a little deterrent kind of derailing the whole progress, that's really common, and that's what we want to avoid.
And I'm confident to say that, just from our conversation today, that you do have the expertise and you do have the passion for helping people. And this is exactly what we love here on Coaching in Session. And so as we begin to wrap up, I would love to get some final words from you. And then I would like you to tell the audience where they can find you and reach out to you.
Great. I loved our conversation. And for patients, we are in the East Village in New York, and also in Brooklyn. And we offer virtual sessions for both wellness and for injuries in New York and Florida, since I'm licensed in Florida. And for any business owners who are curious about systems, I have an account on Instagram that is specific to building systems. Obviously, it's geared towards practice owners, but I'm happy to answer questions from any entrepreneurs. And that is The Planning PT.
Perfect. And I'll make it easy for everyone. All the links will be right down below. So whether you are a business owner, you're looking for some physical therapy help, reach out to Stephanie. It's important to understand that our journey in life is not always going to be exactly what we want it to be. I'm sure the business that you want to start might, fail the first time. You start again and you fails. And then you're like, okay, this is not for me. Let me get a 9-to-5 job. It doesn't have to be that, right? If we don't succeed, right, we can try again, but we don't try from inexperience, right? We try, we start again from wisdom. So that wisdom doesn't even have to only be our own. It could be from another coach, a mentor, a guide, someone who has done it, someone who has been successful. And so we can utilize that into, our next steps and our trajectory moving forward. But then we also have to give ourselves the vessel, the body, the mind, that the mindset that if something is not right, we don't stay there, right? We fix it, whether it be our business, whether it be our body, we make the adjustments. So if you are a business owner and you're looking to elevate, if you are a person who is getting, lackadaisical with their health and their fitness, or there's something aching about your body, don't hesitate. Check out the links in the description box below. As I said, Stephanie's going to be a great asset in your corner. I loved our conversation. Also, I'm excited for people to, look at 2025 with a more optimistic view, not only to the business, but their personal health also. Thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.